Hello, you're listening to Black Owned with Tim McKain, where we interview Black entrepreneurs, Black community builders, everything Black owned with Tim McKain. Hello, today I have the pleasure of interviewing my friend Dominick, owner and operator of Intellectual Actionaire, member of Soul Society. How you doing today, brother?
Man, I'm good, brother, man. It's a pleasure, man. It's good to see you, Tim.
It's good to see you. It's been like 2 years, I feel like, almost.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, when did your passion, when did your purpose for educating our people begin? When did it start?
Oh, man, that's a good question, man. Just in short, it really started with two people, one figuratively and one literally in my life. One was Logie Meacham. He was a professor at University of North Carolina, Greensboro, UNCG, our alma mater, where we graduated. And there was an African American Studies class that we took, and it was specifically for males' rites of passage, which was also the first time I've experienced anything like that, a brotherhood or fraternal order. But it was from an academic standpoint. And the first thing he said is that, one, y'all brothers need to get to know each other, because as Black men, especially in a college setting, we don't know much about each other. And that would lead on to me actually doing work and projects that really help Black men create a network where we can be transparent about who we are, our identity, and how we want to be represented. But he introduced me to that. And also what he introduced me to was hidden knowledge in the Bible. You know, the books that were not implemented inside of the Bible. So at the time I was a Christian, and so when he introduced that to me, it helped me to really understand that education is extremely important, because we've been misinformed or underinformed about a lot of things. The second person was Malcolm X. When I came across the autobiography of Malcolm X, it really helped me to show what America really truly was. And with the various different issues happening with Black males, various different issues happening with Black people in our community, Black women, Black children, it really helped me to understand that, you know what, I need to do more in terms of reshaping my paradigm and my framework. And as I'm doing that, I need to introduce this information to my people, because I know that I wasn't taught about it growing up. My parents weren't exposed to it till later on. When I started telling them about it, and most importantly, a lot of my people, the more I talked to Black people in college and outside of college, I realized that they were miseducated about it too. So it just forced me into really just educating as I was educating myself.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. As you educated yourself, as we always talk about it, as we unlearn and relearn.
Yeah.
What Black organizations were you a part of in the beginning at UNCG, and what led you to ultimately join Soul Society?
Yeah, there were a few. A few of them was Neo-Black Society. Right, which was like one of the probably major Black organizations at UNCG at the time. But even before then, let me read back. My first college experience was not actually at UNCG. It was at Winston-Salem State University. So it ran prior to the people that's out there, all the Rams. So I was in Winston-Salem for quite a bit of time, and I immediately joined organizations the moment I stepped in. The first one was Black Men for Change. It was led me to the rites of passage at UNCG. So there was a couple of brothers who were part of the Kappa Alpha Psi who introduced me to that program, and I joined that. Another one was Big Brother, Big Sister. I was part of the NAACP, also in the Winston-Salem State chapter, and there was another organization I was a part of, but I can't think of it right now. But I was heavily involved when I was in Winston-Salem, and I think they emphasized that community development or being involved into campus community was extremely important. Going back to UNCG, Neo-Black Society, I continued my journey with the NAACP. But when I became dissatisfied with the political agenda that was taking place in those organizations, I joined another one that was a little bit more on the radical side, right? Black Power organization called SIASA. Even though that organization didn't last too long, I was very involved into that for the period of time I was with it. And then essentially, after I graduated, I stopped organizing for a little bit, stopped joining organizations, and eventually I was running the Soul Society. Now, I'm not officially a part of Soul Society, but I have been heavily involved in community projects with Soul Society, working with them. And Brother Brad and Brother T. Walker, them brothers have been organizing and being heavily involved in our community for over 5 years. They just celebrated their 5-year commemoration, I believe last year, the year before that. But I've worked very closely with those brothers just to continue the mission of making sure that I can re-educate my people on a lot of these issues and to be a part of the solution.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What was the inspiration behind Intellectual Actionaire?
Yes. So the Intellectual Actionaire was, it was a need for me to bring a new energy to entrepreneurship that I wasn't seeing. When I was in college, I was introduced to entrepreneurship. And a part of being in the intellectual space and that new paradigming shifting activity of Black empowerment and really embracing myself as a Black person was entrepreneurship. I think entrepreneurship to Black people was like the closest thing to freedom. Because it gave us an opportunity to have control over our lives. See, most people become entrepreneurs to make money. I truly believe that Black people become entrepreneurs to have control over their lives. And so for me, I feel like becoming an entrepreneur was like the first time me actually saying I have say-so on what I do with my life and not someone else, right? And so for me, coming into entrepreneur space, I'm trying to remember the question that you asked so I can be more thorough. Can you ask
What
that
inspired you to start Intellectual Action?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry about that. So I just had to make sure I wasn't going off a tangent.
It's fine.
Because sometimes I could do that. But the Intellectual Actionaire came from a lot of failed attempts at trying to become an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is not easy. It's one of the most hardest things I've done in my life. And you probably know that, with you trying to provide this platform, right? And just the amount of work and energy and time and sometimes not getting paid, because they pay a lot. But Intellectual Actionaire came from all the learned experiences I had from being a community organizer, talking, heavily about issues going on within our systems, and most importantly, what I learned from the entrepreneurial space, which was very different based upon who you were and what your background was. But I wanted the Intellectual Actionaire to be a brand that I personally created from my own mind as I was working with different organizations like Soul Society, but at the same time can help people to understand that you can create your own reality, that you can be smart, that you can be highly educational, that you can speak your mind and speak truth to power, and at the same time create a living from it. And so that's what the Intellectual Actionaire came from. At the time that I created the Intellectual Actionaire, you'll hear that a lot in this community, right? But at the time that I created the Intellectual Actionaire, I wanted to make sure that artists, entrepreneurs, particularly startup entrepreneurs in our community, and teachers, which I was a teacher, had an opportunity to use social media platforms, had an opportunity to get some of this business education, to really understand how if their institution wasn't doing the things that they wanted to see happening with the people that they're serving, that they can create a platform to make it happen. And technology has empowered us to make that happen and create our own voices. So that's what the Intellectual Actionaire was too. Also, I was in this fashion, right? A shout out to my brother Gordon. We was part of the Black Box Project, which was a poetry group, because I'm an artist myself. He designed clothes. And I just found it very interesting becoming a designer, because I always had the ideas, I just didn't have the space to manifest it. And as I grew in that knowledge and grew in the consciousness, I just made it my responsibility to become an educator. But I wanted to blend it too. So I found a space to allow my education and my poetry and myself as an artisan, or an artist in general, to kind of come together into one brand. And that's what the Intellectual Actionaire is. It's that multiple layers of becoming an entrepreneur, an artist, and an educator.
Absolutely.
Right? Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Well, I was just going to say this as a student of yours who actually, and by the way, you gotta check it out, Intellectual Actionaire.
Yeah.
From the conversations we've had, just from the IG, Facebook conversations you have with other people, you always talk about paradigm shifts.
Yes.
What are paradigm shifts, and how can the right kind of paradigm shift affect someone's life in a positive way?
Absolutely, absolutely. So paradigm comes from a man by the name of Thomas Kuhn in the 60s and 70s, I believe. He wrote this book called The Structures of Scientific Revolution. And Thomas Kuhn's white guy, he created this thing called the Kuhn cycle, right? And the Kuhn cycle talks to you about the different levels in which information is being processed from both the individuals and the collective, in which they accept that information to be true, regardless if that information can later be challenged or not supported, or it's just an organized body of information. It really shapes the paradigm. And so that's where that term kind of came from. Now, 19 Keys came into the picture and really popularized paradigm shift, because, he created the shifters in a sense. And he was one of the first to go viral on social media, creating his own platform to talk about the paradigm. For me, when I read Thomas Kuhn's work and saw 19 Keys really popularized in our community, I just wanted to continue that movement. But I really wanted to be part of the behind the scenes active process of really shifting people's paradigm. I know for many of us, we've been fed certain narratives and biases about our lives and the way we should live our lives, which for a lot of cases has been distorted, misrepresented, or a half-truth. So my paradigm shifting is to introduce new information in an organized but digestible way for people to have an opportunity to really experience a different outlook, right? To experience a different lens on their lives and the society in which they live in. So that's a paradigm shift. So I do that by entrepreneurship, and I also do that by my art, by creating symbols, by creating clothing, by creating a certain look that can help shift people's mindsets. from previous information they've been exposed to. So that's how I kind of do paradigm shift, and I do it through my imagery, I do it through my classes, and I do it through certain ways of marketing my brand.
When it comes to entrepreneurship, what advice would you give to young black people about starting their businesses? And also, we also have to be very diverse in our businesses, from not only from the entertainment side, but also from need-based business.
Right.
So what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs, as well as having diversity in our businesses?
Well, what I would tell young people is, in the age of information, knowledge is truly valuable. You add value to yourself with the more knowledge that you have. And the power of being young is, though you may not have enough money, you have the most valuable thing in this world. That's actually more valuable than money, which is time. So I tell young people, spend time gaining knowledge. You know, Gary Vaynerchuk, which is kind of like a social media giant, right? He told, if you're between the ages of, 16 to 39, just try stuff. Try stuff until you find something that you actually truly like doing, that you don't have to think much about, and money is not really an obstacle for you, or you don't think about making money the moment that you do it. It's almost like harmony in a sense. So I tell young people, just try stuff. Gain knowledge. Don't worry about the results, so say. Because I know it's very easy to get caught up in YouTube and see a kid riding a Ferrari talking about I made, $250,000 doing this, click in the bio, click on the link to figure out how I did it, right? We all know that that's, publicity stunts and things of that nature. But what I want young people to do, or what I want young people to start getting an understanding of, is that they had to go through a process to do that. Either they're faking it or it took them a very long time. Because the people who are 22 years old or 25 years old making a lifestyle like that, they started when they were 16. And they started learning stuff. And so within that, it took them years to develop the skill that they needed to get to that income. And then they don't talk about how many times they failed just to get to that point.
Yeah.
Because the biggest winners are the biggest failures.
So how do you inspire? Okay, let's say for instance, a young man, a young woman was taking your class and they were telling you, man, I'm struggling in my business. I'm not making the amount of money that I want to make.
Yeah.
What advice would you tell someone who was struggling to start their own business, who was a member of your class, a part of your class?
Well, that's part of the process. When there's something about pain that we have to start acknowledging, that it's part of the process to grow. If you're not going through any type of pain or anguish or frustration or downturns, you're not going to go up. The law of physics, right? The law of the universe says that what goes up must come down. What comes down must go up. So the deeper you go down in doing something that you know is valuable, it's gonna go up if you properly put it in the places that it needs to be put in order for it to catapult itself. Because and there's this thing with time too, I tell people. When you're undergoing a pain process with something that is extremely valuable, time is an essence. It's an asset. Because it might not seem valuable at that moment, but it's gonna be valuable in the future. Because time says that whatever you put a lot of energy into, whatever you put a lot of time into, and if you organize enough people to really validate what you're doing, it's only gonna be a matter of time before it becomes extremely valuable in the market.
Absolutely.
So I just tell people, if you're struggling right now, that's a part of the process. It's the learning curve you have to go through. It might be something that you need to work on personally. It might be the timing that you're putting it out that might not be right for it. But if you just keep pushing through that process, that pain process, when the time comes, you'll already be ready because you prepared yourself years ago. You prepared yourself when you were failing. So I just tell people, prepare yourself. If you find yourself failing, prepare more because your time is coming.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So a lot about being a business owner is learning new things. Always. So what are some of the things that you do to always learn? Like, who are some of the people that you look up to that help you in your overall life goals when it comes to not only teaching others, but educating yourself for the betterment of your business and for our community?
Absolutely. Yeah, the best way to learn something is to be around people who just know more than you and to study their process. You could read books. I love reading books, but the way our minds process information sometimes is really, really hard to get to those nitty-gritty details. According to neuroscience, we are taking in about 11 million bits of information per second, but our conscious minds can only process about 40 bits of that. So, you know, you have to constantly inundate yourself with information and to give yourself enough time to process that information in order for you to execute it. You can best get that when you're around people on a day-to-day basis who are doing things that you know little about, but you know can add value to your brand. Because once you see them do it over and over and over again, your minds will start picking up the pattern, and you can begin to start in your own creative process, learning that pattern, and then putting your own little twist to it. So I tell people, just hang around folks that know more than you, that recommend books. You know, put yourself in a space of scholarship. You know, sacrifice some time so you can learn more about things that you're ignorant towards. You know, I do a lot of that. You know, I take probably less vacations than most people. You know, even though I consider myself a little bit more well-traveled than I've been in the last couple of years. But even when I was in college, bro, I didn't go to a lot of parties. I stopped doing that very early on. I stayed in the books. I'd be in the library every weekend.
That's why I met you.
Most people, when they tell me college, they met me in the library. You know, Jawanza Kafuju, who's an amazing scholar talking about the development of black males, right? Particularly in the library, he says that if you spend 8 hours dribbling the ball, you're bound to be a great basketball player. But if you spend 8 hours in the library, you're bound to be a good scholar.
Wow.
If you spend 8 hours doing the things that you love, you're bound to be really good at that skill, or whatever that craft is that you want to shape for your reality.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So all it takes, man, to get through the learning process, to give y'all a mathematical equation, all it takes is 10,000 hours to master a skill.
Malcolm Gladwell,
10,000 hours to master a skill.
Yes,
If you
sir.
spend 8 to 12 hours doing something that you really love, you'll be a master in it in 2 years. So just think about that. And you can do the math from there. If you cut it down in half, that's how long it'll take you to get there.
Yes, sir.
But just think about it, 10,000 hours, and that's how I become a master at a craft.
My last question to you is, every advocate for the black community, everyone who does the work, someone like yourself, they have a vision, they have a plan for black America.
Right.
How does your vision for black America plan out in your head?
Well, it's going to have to be a combination of different things. It's the most toughest question that you would ever ask me, because the black experience is the most complex experience in this country, you know, arguably probably in this world. I think our experience in this country can really set the tone for what colonization has done in the last 400 to 500 years, 600 years. My vision for black Americans is that we have an opportunity to be recognized and have full control of what we've been contributing to the world since we've been here, especially in the United States of America. There wouldn't be a United States of America without black people. A lot of other people, don't get me wrong, but especially black people. So my vision of black people is that we have complete control over what we've contributed in this country and across the world, right? I think one thing I love that black people have had somewhat control over in terms of imagery and influence was hip hop. Everybody wants to be a rapper.
Yeah.
2021. That was us. And if we had full autonomy over that, as well as various aspects of what we built in this country, the things that we've invented, that would be one of the greatest visions I can have on black people, to have proper political representation. I mean, we make up about, what, 14, 15% of the U.S. population, maybe 13%. I got to go back and check the census data.
13%.
All I want is just to have 12 to 13 to 15% of everything that this country has to offer in terms of wealth. We need to have representation in that. Politics, we need to be having 13% representation. And the economic development in terms of control of industries and manufacturing, 13% of that, right? Aspects of decision making for ourselves and representation of the United States of America and just across the globe in general. We need to have the proper representation in terms of the demographics that we reflect in the places that we live. And our voices need to be respected and heard. That's my vision. Now, I know we creative, so I can't speak on behalf of all black people. But whatever that looks in our creative process, I would like to see it manifest that. But I would like for black people to really own up to who they are and to have complete autonomy over their bodies, over their names, and over their history and their narratives.
Yes, sir.
That's my vision.
That's amazing. A beautiful vision, my brother.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your time.
No, thank you, Tim. I appreciate you, brother.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, man.
Why don't you shout out where the people can find you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Where can the people find you on social media, platforms, all that? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so Dominick you can find me on Facebook at Dominick. You can also find my business page on Facebook, which is the Intellectual Actionaire, LLC. Instagram is intellectual_actionaire. Twitter, it is Dominant Thought, I believe, on Twitter. Yeah, so Dominant Thought, that's my poetry name, but you can also type in Intellectual Action there, and you'll probably find me there. And also, you can check out my website. If you like my clothing, if you like to book me, if you would like to work with me one-on-one, you can find me at www.intellectualactionaire.com.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Yes,
you,
sir.
bro.
Appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you.
you.